There was a time when American neighborhoods had a pulse. Kids played stickball in the street until the streetlights came on. Corner stores knew your name. You could walk to get milk, mail a letter, grab a cup of coffee, all without getting in a car. Neighbors sat on their porches in the evening. The architecture of daily life created collisions between people who might never have met otherwise. Then something shifted. Not all at once, but gradually, until one day you looked around and realized the life had been drained out. The streets emptied. The porches stood vacant. The corner stores closed. What replaced them was not progress. It was isolation masquerading as convenience. This did not happen by accident. It was designed. In 1956, the federal government authorized the largest public works program in American history. 41,000 miles of interstate highways connecting nearly every major city and state capital. The stated goals were noble enough: to alleviate traffic, to facilitate national defense, and to modernize America's infrastructure. But the reality of how this played out destroyed something we have not been able to rebuild. Planners decided the best way to deal with what they called urban blight was to bulldoze straight through it. Neighborhoods that had stood for generations were erased to make room for 8 lanes of concrete. And the neighborhoods chosen were not random. They were disproportionately Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. Miami's Overtown went from 40,000 residents to 8,000. St. Paul's Rondo neighborhood lost 600 homes and 300 businesses in a single sweep. Nationally, over 1 million people were displaced. The Federal Housing Administration's own manual recommended using highways to separate what they called incompatible racial groups. Concrete barriers became tools of segregation. These were not unfortunate side effects, they were policy. But the destruction went beyond any single neighborhood. What happened next was a complete restructuring of how Americans lived, and it created problems we are still grappling with today. The new model was simple: build low-density suburbs far from city centers, connect them with highways, and assume everyone would drive everywhere. It seemed efficient, it felt modern, and for a brief window, it looked like prosperity, except none of it was sustainable. Here is what nobody calculated. Low-density sprawl requires massive infrastructure, roads, sewers, and water lines stretching for miles to serve relatively few homes. That infrastructure costs a fortune to maintain, and the tax revenue from spread-out suburban development almost never covers the bill. Cities were taking on enormous long-term debts in exchange for short-term cash. This is what analysts now call the growth Ponzi scheme. You build new suburbs to generate revenue to maintain the old suburbs, and you keep expanding until you cannot anymore. Then the whole system collapses. By 2024, Houston's net financial position was negative $14.6 billion. These are not outliers, they are warnings. St. Paul, with its compact, walkable core, generates nearly 4 times more tax revenue per acre than the low-density suburb of Maplewood. The infrastructure overhead of sprawl eats everything, but the financial crisis is only part of it. What got lost in the switch to car-dependent neighborhoods was something harder to quantify: human connection. When neighborhoods are designed so that every trip requires a car, spontaneous interaction dies. You move from your private home to your private vehicle to your private workplace and back again. There is no sidewalk, no corner store, no reason to run into your neighbor. The U.S. Surgeon General has declared loneliness a public health epidemic. Social isolation now poses health risks comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, a 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of dementia in older adults. And the design of our neighborhoods is a primary driver. What disappeared were third places, the coffee shops, barber shops, libraries, and parks that are not home and are not work. These were the anchors of civic life, the places where people from different backgrounds encountered each other. Between 2019 and 2021, third places experienced widespread closures. Each one did not just remove a business, it removed a piece of the social infrastructure that held neighborhoods together. People in car-dependent suburbs report 13% higher rates of social isolation than those in walkable areas. Residents of walkable neighborhoods have nearly twice as many meaningful social interactions per day. The difference is not personality, it is environment. If you are someone who loves uncovering the unique chapters that shape the American identity, you will want to subscribe to follow along for more stories like this. And for the roughly 1/3 of Americans who do not drive, children, elderly people who have stopped driving, people with disabilities, life in a car-dependent neighborhood means being left behind entirely. 2 million older adults are prevented from visiting friends because they lack transportation options. For children, the inability to move independently through their neighborhood limits social development. Parents must shuttle them everywhere, assuming every household has a caregiver with time and a vehicle. The built environment doesn't just influence whether you see your neighbors, it determines whether you survive crossing the street. Pedestrian deaths reached a 40-year high in 2022. In 2023 alone, 7,314 pedestrians were killed, one every 72 minutes. These aren't accidents. They're the predictable result of designing roads for speed rather than safety. The most dangerous infrastructure is what planners call the strode, a high-speed thoroughfare lined with commercial destinations. These roads try to move cars at 50 miles per hour while people attempt to cross on foot to reach stores. 60% of pedestrian deaths happen on these roads. 77% happen in the dark. The proliferation of SUVs and trucks has made crashes deadlier. Larger vehicles strike pedestrians in the chest or head rather than the legs, significantly increasing fatality rates. 1 in 4 pedestrian deaths is now a hit and run. Some cities are beginning to reverse course. Orlando saw a 40% drop in deadly crashes after implementing street design changes. California is requiring daylighting at intersections statewide, removing parking obstructions near crosswalks to improve visibility. These aren't radical interventions. They're acknowledgments that the deaths were never inevitable. They were design choices. The car-dependent model even dictates where people can live. Zoning laws and mandatory parking minimums have turned American cities into places that prioritize vehicle storage over housing. Structured parking costs between $30,000 and $50,000 per space, and those costs are passed directly to renters and buyers. Up to 50% of mandated parking spaces go unused. For people who don't own cars, these mandates are a forced subsidy of car culture. For developers, they make affordable housing projects financially impossible. Cities like Denver, Austin, and Minneapolis have begun eliminating parking minimums. Denver's reform is projected to increase housing construction by 12.5%. By removing the requirement for surplus parking, developers can build missing middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, and small apartment buildings that fit into existing neighborhoods. This is the kind of development that makes cities financially sustainable. But something is shifting. Across the country, cities are beginning to undo the damage of the 1956 Highway Act. Urban freeways are being capped, lowered, or removed entirely. These projects aim to reconnect neighborhoods severed decades ago. Rochester converted its inner loop east into a local boulevard, reclaiming 6.5 acres for a new neighborhood. San Francisco removed the Octavia Boulevard viaduct and created landscaped boulevards that revitalized the streetscape. Dallas built the Clyde Warren Deck Park, reconnecting uptown and downtown. St. Paul is planning Reconnect Rondo, a land bridge designed to restore affordable housing in a community destroyed by Interstate 94. California's Homes Before Highways initiative revealed that over 800 homes were demolished for highway projects between 2018 and 2024. New policies would require replacement housing and prioritize converting highway lanes to bus lanes rather than further widening. These aren't cosmetic fixes. They're recognitions that the experiment failed. The promise was efficiency and prosperity. What it delivered was isolation, insolvency, and danger. The evidence from urban planning, economics, sociology, and public health all points in the same direction. Building America for cars was a profound mistake. It displaced millions, created fiscal crises cities can't afford to resolve, engineered loneliness into daily life, and made simply crossing the street life threatening. The recovery will not come from a single federal program. It will come from a return to compact, productive, socially integrated neighborhoods. It will come from prioritizing the stability of communities over the speed of commutes. It will come from recognizing that a city is a collection of people, not a network of roads. The American neighborhood used to feel alive because it was designed for people. We can build that again. But first, we have to admit what we lost and why.